welcome everyone. Welcome to everyone who's joined me here on Zoom, and welcome everyone who's joining us out there on Facebook to our third unit of What is Passivhaus Design. So hopefully you followed me already for my unit 1 and 2. Unit 1 and 2 was about why buildings are so impactful, so a little bit of the background on Passivhaus. Then we talked about the Passivhaus standard and the 5 Passivhaus components. And today we will talk a little bit about some other things that we need to consider when we're going into Passivhaus design. And we will say, why doesn't everyone do Passivhaus? And we will come to some conclusions. So let me jump into it and tell you all about it. Please, if you have questions out there on Facebook, put them in the comments. We can answer them afterwards, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. All right, let me share my screen. Good. So let's start with our unit 3 of What is Passivhaus Design. So the first question I have is, does Passivhaus limit our design? Okay. And that's a big question that people are having probably in their mind, that we've heard about before, because they're thinking, well, if we need to go Passivhaus, maybe we need to build a box or something. But the answer to that question is no. Passivhaus does not limit the design. It is the budget, like always. Yeah, so studies have shown that Passivhaus can cost up to 20% more. However, if we're looking at architectural features, they regularly exceed 30% of the build costs. So it really is all your architectural features that can really blow up the budget. So Passivhaus doesn't need to be expensive. It can actually be on par with our conventional buildings. We've got here an example of the limestone house of John Wardle Architects. Now you can see this is a beautifully architecturally designed building. It is a certified Passivhaus, and you can see all those features that would add to the cost. It's not necessarily the Passivhaus standard that makes it expensive. It's the architectural features. Also, I want to remind you or tell you that Passivhaus is team play. This is really important. Passivhaus design is a team effort. And what we say to everyone always is that get all important parties involved as early as possible. Yeah. So have your certifier, have your Passivhaus designer on board from the get-go, your architect, your builder, and all your engineers. That would be ideal, because then everything can be detailed and set in stone before the construction starts. That avoids disappointment later, that avoids complications later. So this is really what you want to do. What often happens, and you might have seen that if you are from a building professional background, is that the architect designs a beautiful home, like the dream, the fairy dream castle for their clients, and the clients really fall in love with that design. And then they get an estimate, a cost estimate, they present that to the client, and it's over budget. Yeah, but because they fell in love with this design so much, they don't want to let go of that. And the first things that are always going are your energy efficiency measures. It's your thermal insulation, it's your double glazed windows, it's your air tightness that will go, because these are the things that we don't see, but they are so important to implement at the starting phase of your build, because later on it's not economical to add on to then exchange your windows in 5 years. So that's not economical. This has to be done now. Please get all your team involved, make sure that your design is in budget, and then present it to your client. Because what we see is that our influence on our total life cycle cost of the project is biggest in the startup and the planning phase. Later on, our impact isn't as big anymore. Yeah, so the possibilities to influence the cost, that decreases significantly. So the biggest part we have here at that startup and planning phase. So please use that, make use of that, so that we can build a home that is within the budget and is energy efficient, and that has all the features that we want from it, ideally to the Passivhaus standard. So put your team together early on. That's one of our biggest recommendations. Then now we want to ask ourselves, where does Passivhaus design actually start? Yeah, so what do we need to do to get us started on the Passivhaus journey? So, and I must say, like with every project, Passivhaus also starts with our town planning. So we want to have a look at the orientation of the allotments. We want to look at what planting is there, so what existing features are already there, and maybe what color scheme needs to be done. What are the R codes, and what will be the shape of the building? Yeah, and this is not Passivhaus specific. This is something you need to consider for any project, but you see, this is also important for Passivhaus. Then you want to select the right location and the right allotment for your building. You want to take particular care in looking for the right orientation, because as I explained in one of the earlier units, if you have seen that, we talked about making use of the sunlight, making use of that for the heating of our building. The orientation is really important. Then we want to look at regulations. What are the regulations? What are the restrictions? And then finally, we want to look at the shape of the building and the layout of the building. So size really matters. And we will talk about that in a minute. I will explain to you why it matters so much. Good. Then other guidelines, not just for Passivhaus, but really something that can make a big difference in your design is the form factor. So you want to look at your size of your building, the shape of it, and the compactness of your building. Then you want to work with the sun. So you want to know how many windows, how big windows you have, what the shading situation is like. So shading is really, really important, especially if we are living in a warmer climate, like most of us here in Australia are. We want to have the shading right so that we avoid overheating in summer. And what is the orientation of our windows? Yeah, so where do we put them so that we can make the most use out of them? Good. Now we want to talk a little bit about those different guidelines or those different factors, and I'll shed a little bit more light on why they are so important, because I think we have talked so much about the Passivhaus components and we know about them. So in our last unit, we talked about the 5 Passivhaus components. We understand what they do. Yeah, so we've got our thermal insulation, our air tightness, our Passivhaus windows, our thermal bridge-free design, and our mechanical ventilation system. So we understand what they do. But before we implement them, we have to look at the basic layout of our building. Yeah, and that's what we're doing now, because that plays a big role as well. So first, I want to talk about size. Yeah, because size is the biggest driver, like this guy here, the biggest driver on land and building costs, on your running costs, and on sustainability. And why is that? Yeah, so obviously, if you're building bigger, you need a bigger lot. Yeah, you need a bigger piece of land. You need more materials to build. So that makes your building from the get-go, whether it's Passivhaus or not, makes your building more expensive. The running costs, because if we have a bigger building, we need more energy to heat and cool it, to condition it. Yeah, so we need more money to run it. And on sustainability as well, for all the above reasons, more material, more energy used. So size is really a big factor. And the problem, I think, is, especially in nations, like in rich nations, developed nations like Australia, house sizes are really, really big. Yeah, so we all want that prestige. We want to have, I don't know, 400, 600 square meters for our family. I think that's something that we've sort of grown used to. And Australia has one of the biggest house sizes in the world. If you see here, average new home size around the globe, Australia is leading even before the United States and Canada with 214 square meters. Doesn't sound that big, but this is an average. Yeah, so an average of all house sizes. There are some that are really a lot bigger. And if you're looking to now what Passivhaus recommends, or at least the Passivhaus Institute, yes, it comes from Germany, where living spaces are generally a little bit smaller. Passivhaus recommends 30 square meter per person for a home. Yeah, sounds probably a bit crazy, but if you think about it, for 4 people, that would be 120 square meters. That's a very typical home in Germany, where 4 people would comfortably live. So maybe we'll have to think a little bit more about how can we make clever use of our space without having to have 5 different bedrooms and guest room number 1 and guest room number 2 and a theater room and all that, and make clever use of our space and do good planning. So with good planning and learnings from the tiny home movement, that is achievable to go a little bit smaller, and then we can already save from the word get-go. Smart room use and good design can achieve this goal. Now, obviously, if we're coming from a nation like Australia, where we have 80 plus square meter per person, then reducing it to 30 square meter per person would be a little bit much to ask. What we're saying here is, as long as we're building a building that has a long lifetime, so we can expect a lifetime of 100 years, and we have a good performance like Passivhaus, then we are already winning. Yeah, then that's fine. We believe here at Smart Pass Academy that if we would bring it down to about 50 square meter per person, that would be a massive achievement. So for 4 people, 200 square meters, that would be a good achievement here, where we're building so big. So that's already reducing your footprint. So, but think about it or talk to your client about it. Do you really need that size, or can we make our building a little bit smaller? And our next factor is shape. Okay, that's the second biggest driver on our building costs, running costs, and sustainability. And I want to explain to you, give you a little bit of explanation on these three sort of images here. So we have a compact situation. So all of these three shapes here have the same treated floor area. So if we see that as a plan, this is the same square meterage in all three of them, but we have made it less ideal in the shape. Yeah, we've changed the shape. And by that, we've increased our envelope area. So we've increased here the envelope area by 10% and here by 20%. So our square meters of the building envelope goes up, and that is then causing us higher construction costs and higher running costs, because now we have more envelope area where energy could get lost. We're not gaining anything. We're not gaining any square meterage. We're just gaining a little courtyard or something that is also more complicated to build. Yeah, corners are always the ones that are complicated to build. Maybe we end up with some unusable space. So keep that in mind. Keep your buildings simple, in a simple form. And I'll also tell you in a minute how we can still make it interesting to look at, even if we're staying within a simple shape. That is to work with the surfaces, not with the shapes. Yeah, so use your surfaces to make your building interesting. So obviously this is like more like a historical facade. That's probably not something you would do in a new build, but maybe use some local materials. Yeah, really ground that building into the landscape. Maybe use something that you find in your surroundings. If there's a certain timber that's prevalent, if there's some stones or some typical building methods, then use that to make it a feature. Or use some external features, use some external balconies, something that you thermally separate from your indoors, roofs, balconies that are only attached with a point, use different material claddings. All of that can be used in a passive house without having an influence on the shape and on the performance of the building. So make it interesting that way, rather than making it a complicated shape. It will also be cheaper to build, less problems on site. So all up, it makes it a lot easier. And then the compactness is our third biggest driver on building costs, running costs, and sustainability. So here it's a little bit similar to shape, but with compactness, we're talking really about making it compact, as in, for example, don't build a long, narrow shape, but maybe rather put a second story on and make that building compact in itself. Again, that saves on our external envelope and saves us money on the running costs and on the building costs. So here, if we're looking at this as a scenario of a terraced house, if we have shared walls in the middle, then we can massively reduce our building costs, because we're saving here on those external walls, as you can see in between those dwellings, and we can save on the running costs, because now we have an internal wall instead of an external wall, and there we're not losing energy to the external environment. So our form factor, that's what we are talking about here. So our form factor is our surface build of the building envelope compared to our building volume. Yeah, so less area where the energy can leak out is better. Yeah, so if we're looking at this factor here, so the more compact buildings, like apartment buildings, like these sort of more compact buildings, they are better in the form factor. If we're going to more spread out buildings, then that form factor is less ideal, and we're losing more energy. So yeah, I already said that. So less area where the energy can leak out is better. And apartment blocks and commercial buildings, their passive house building is easier to achieve. So we always say bigger buildings are easier to achieve. Yeah, because we already have that compactness. Usually that always gets also gets cheaper per square meter. Also the air tightness is easier to achieve because we have less envelope area. So all of that gets a bit easier when we're coming to those bigger and more compact buildings. Good. So these are the influences that we should consider before we sort of start our passive house design. And now that you've learned this, and that you've hopefully also listened to my previous units with what the passive house standard is and how to do the 5 components, we really see that passive house makes so much sense. Okay, so I really believe that passive house only makes sense. There's nothing that should stop us. But what is actually stopping us from doing this? Why is not everyone going for Passivhaus? And we've got here a few ideas. We're thinking that this could be the things that hold us back, okay? So one of the things that we're thinking is that maybe some professionals believe that materials are not available or widely available in Australia, but we can tell you here that the opposite is true. We have multiple suppliers on the market for each essential material or product, also to cater for various budgets. Yeah, so we have here an example for heat recovery ventilation systems. We have Stiebel Eldron, Zenda, Villavent, Brink. So all of these are on the market, available, readily available here in Australia. For air tightness systems, we have Proclima, Siga, Roadblocks, we have OSBs. All of that can be used. You find your right supplier for your needs. And the second thing that we often hear people saying stops them from going Passivhaus is that the myth that Passivhaus is expensive and difficult to achieve. Yeah, so that's probably one of the biggest ones. And yes, while additionally, we might have to pay about $250 to $700 extra per square meter to bring us to the Passivhaus standard. But really, if you think about it, it's not that much for what you get. Yeah, as a reminder, we're getting a healthy home that's comfortable and sustainable. Yeah, and this is something that we should all achieve for, because we can't really put a price on our health. That should be on the forefront of our mind. And for that amount of money, we really want to build quality and something that we have, you know, that home would stand there for until the end of your life. That's a quality build that would be long into the future. The other thing is we have now things like incentives and green loans where we could have a return on investment on the Passivhaus from day one. Yeah. So we've learned that, yes, whilst we may have to spend a little bit of extra money initially, with a green loan, we might now be on par with a conventional construction, if not better off. So please listen into our presentation about finance. Yeah, we've got that as CPD points. I think it's in our series of CPD points is number 5. There we talk all about green loans and how to finance Passivhaus and how that really makes sense and how you can get away with no extra cost from the first day if you're finding the right loan for your Passivhaus. Okay. So Passivhaus are just normal buildings built better. So you get the extra quality and you may not even have to pay extra for it. It's not rocket science. We can really achieve that. And then the third thing that we're thinking could stop us or could stop people from going Passivhaus is the fear of getting tested on the quality of the air tightness. Yeah, people are saying it might be too hard to achieve. I don't know. 0.6 sounds pretty low. But we can tell you that now professionals are getting more and more proficient in that, and they're achieving amazing results. The Scholten Group has already achieved values as low as 0.08. Now, as a reminder, the Passivhaus standard asks us for 0.6, not for 0.06, for 0.6 exchanges per hour. So here this is nearly 10 times better than the Passivhaus requirement. And they're saying, if I quote them, 0.6 wasn't hard at all. With a bit of planning, it is easy. So that's what we're always saying. Planning is crucial. Plan your air tightness system. Know what you want to do at each of the corners. Obviously, it also comes a little bit with experience. So try and maybe for your first Passivhaus, get an experienced air tightness installer and then watch them and learn from that. And then the next one will be easier and easier and easier. Yeah, so it's a learning process as well, but you will get better with each Passivhaus you're building. Good. So hopefully that's not any hurdles anymore. Now we come to a little conclusion of our course here about what is Passivhaus design. And the first thing is I want to say, what is the right question? Yeah. So for me, the question is not if Passivhaus is economical or if my client will be happy with a slightly smaller home. Yeah. So for me, the question is, can we afford not to go for efficiency? Can we stay energy dependent on nations or on leaders that don't have our values? Or can we keep destroying the planet and let our children figure it out? Can we afford not to go for energy efficient buildings? And for me, that's a no-brainer. Passivhaus or beyond should be what we're striving for. Yeah, for me, there's no question at all. Because as a reminder, there is no planet B. Yeah. Earth is our only home. If we want life as we know it, we need a climate as we know it, and we've already destroyed so many things. We caused many extinctions. Now we're tampering with the climate. And if we want to change that, in the last IPCC report from 2022, it says that it's now or never if we want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees without immediate and deep emissions reduction across all sectors. It will be impossible. And because buildings have such a big impact on greenhouse gas emissions, there's a big opportunity for us. So here it says global greenhouse gas emissions from buildings were 12 gigatons CO2 equivalent in 2019. That's about 21% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, so here we're talking about almost a quarter. Yeah, so there's a massive opportunity, and we have now less than 560 days to pivot emissions. We have to act soon. Yeah, so as we have this responsibility as a building professional, I see it also as a massive opportunity. Yeah. So the building industry plus the use of buildings are the biggest driver, or one of the biggest drivers, for climate change. And that is our opportunity because it's so big, we can do so much. Yeah. And also people spend over 90% of their time indoors. Yeah. So here we can really do something, not only for the climate, but also for the people who are inhabiting these spaces that we are creating. We are creating these living spaces. And what we can do as building professionals, we can now create healthy and comfortable indoor environments. We can do this economically, and at the same time, we can do it sustainably and save the planet. And I think this is beautiful. Isn't it great to save the planet, but at the same time give your client a better product than before? Yeah, they don't have to get rid of anything. They don't have to make any compromises. They're getting a better product, and we're saving the planet at the same time. You hear that I'm passionate about this, and there's more courses out there as well where I talk only about sustainability and about health and about comfort. So all of these are also available as CPD points if you want to hear more. And I want to leave you with a little quote from Steve Jobs, and that says, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And I really believe in that. So I want you, I hope I inspired you. I hope you really believe that you can change the world bit by bit, building by building. Start building Passivhaus. If it's not the full Passivhaus, your first one, then at least do little steps towards it and learn and grow with that, and sort of learn how to make your buildings better, and by that saving our environment. So what could be the next step for you? If you already have some previous knowledge of Passivhaus, you could, so you need the training to gain a certification. Obviously, if you want to become a certified Passivhaus designer, then you need training. You can jump onto our courses straight away. Yeah, so we have self-paced courses available that's well structured and flexible. You can organize your own timetable, so it's fully recorded. Or otherwise, if you first want to learn a little bit more and see if Passivhaus is right for you, we've got short courses, we've got free courses, we've got other things out there on our website that you could do first, or a pre-course for our designer course. So if you're not quite sure where you stand with your knowledge, try that all out. And we are really, really happy to support you on our journey. I would love to see you in one of our courses, obviously. And yeah, I hope that I've inspired you and that you will jump onto the Passivhaus train very soon. So thank you very much for listening to me today, to really sort of start making our world a better place. And yeah, I hope I see you again sometime soon. We will have another session in a fortnight. So this will be our Christmas special. I'll talk more about Passivhaus, and I hope to see you there. Thank you very much.